good morning, Virgin Islands, and happy Paradise Tuesday to all. And this rainy Tuesday, April 14 in Santa Cruz. Nonetheless, we're here today, but there's a flash flood warning. So motorists are advised to be careful. If you don't have to leave your house, you could just stay home and enjoy the rain as it trickle into your cistern if you have your cistern or you have your farm or your garden, and just listen to the beautiful music of the raindrops as they fall. Once again, welcome to At the Table with Crucian Educator. And this is a talk show, and the most popular and the best radio talk show station, WSTX. You're listening to 970 AM on your radio dial. You're welcome to call in if you're interested in joining the discussion today. I have three questions that I'm going to present. The numbers to call in are 340-773-0390 and 340-773-0490. It's my pleasure to serve as the host of this talk show, At the Table with Crucian Educator. This is yours truly, Verdell Peterson. Those of you who have been listening, you know the format. I don't have a guest today, so I will be presenting three questions for discussion. And as I said, you're welcome to call in. 5 topics I usually avoid in this talk show are not necessarily in this order, but I avoid political ideologies. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, your feelings, your thoughts, your theories, beliefs, etc. But you're not entitled to your own facts. So I prefer to focus on the process and civic education and governance. But we know we're in a political cycle, election cycle. There will be a general election in November, the first Tuesday in November by law. As far as primary election, that's up in the air now. What's going on with that? Exactly what's going to happen. And we'll get to that. I avoid personality conflicts. There are laws in place. There's a third branch of government. We have what is known as a Republican form of government. 3 branches. Each branch has a specific role and responsibilities, and they serve as a check and balance for each other. So, rather than into personal and personality conflicts, I avoid that and focus more, as I said, on the process. Also, religion. You have many talk shows that, and no problem. It's good to discuss religion. However, my focus is more, as I said, civic education, Virgin Islands history, culture, and heritage, rather than religion, mythology, and conspiracy theories. We live in a democracy, American form democracy. We have a government that is structured and what is known as representative democracy. That means that people go to the poll, those who are eligible to vote, who are registered voters, they go to the polls and they make a decision who they want to be represented, who they want to represent us, the people, everybody, everybody that's make up the population of the U.S. Virgin Islands. So there's a process in place and there are laws in place. But I have 3 questions that I wish to pose. And remember now, you're entitled to your opinions, but opinions are not facts. Facts can be verified, but we could have a civil discussion on issues. I like to focus on the issues. I like to hear your thoughts on the issues. But as I said, facts can be verified. Everybody's not going to have the same opinion on something, but you're welcome to opine. And these 3 questions. The first question is, should political parties pay for primary elections? There is a pending matter in court. And as I said, there's an upcoming general election. The law states if there's to be a primary, it would be the first Saturday in August. So the primary elections are held on Saturdays. Well, I went and I did some research and I studied the history and the politics involving primaries, and it's been a back and forth between political parties, officials. Lawsuits have been filed in the past, so it seemed to be an ongoing battle about as far as primary elections and who is responsible for paying for, or who should be responsible for paying for primary elections. But laws are in place. As I mentioned, there are 3 branches of government. And these 3 branches of government have specific roles. There's the first branch. The first branch of government is known as the legislative branch. If we're talking about the federal level, that's known as the Congress. If we're talking about the local level, it's known as the legislature. We are in the 36th legislature, and the senators, we elect senators to the legislature. And in our local government, the legislature is made up of 7 district senators from each district and 1 at-large senator that's elected by the voters from both districts. So you have the 2 districts, St. Thomas, St. John district. Residents of Water Island can also vote in that district. Because remember, Water Island is the 4th Virgin Islands. It's not just St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John. And you do have people live on Water Island. Then You also have the St. Croix district. Voters elect 7 senators from the St. Croix district, just like from the St. Thomas and St. John district. Only residents of bona fide resident of St. Croix could be eligible to run for the Senate. You can't be from St. Croix and decide to run as a district senator from the district of St. Thomas. You have to belong to the district in which you're going to be elected. But the St. Thomas, St. John district from 3 islands, bona fide resident can run to represent the St. Thomas, St. John district. So you could be a bona fide resident of St. John, St. Thomas, or Water Island and be eligible to run for a district seat. For the at-large, you have to be a bona fide resident of St. John. And there's a lot of confusion about that. It's unfortunate some members of the Board of Elections don't understand the meaning of bona fide residence. The language doesn't say specifically that you must be residing in St. John. Just say you have to have a bona fide residence. So you may be living on St. Thomas, but if you already establish a bona fide residence and it doesn't change, your bona fide residence usually doesn't change. It remains the same. It's your domicile. So you can go live at St. Thomas and still be elected as a bona fide resident. So you could meet the requirements to run for at-large. And that information that could be obtained from reading the Revised Organic Act of 1954, which is our de facto constitution. Now, we have the second branch. That's made up, that's the executive branch. And the governor is elected. We have been electing governors since 1970. The first elected governor was Melvin H. Evans, a physician, a medical doctor. He was the first elected governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The governor has a cabinet. He appoints members to serve on his cabinet. And all these terms that I'm throwing out, well, I believe knowledge is power. I don't have time to go into giving you definitions, but I would strongly suggest that you go and read information for yourself. I am suggesting 5 documents that you should be familiar with. And that's the Revised Organic Act of 1954, which is our de facto constitution. The Virgin Islands Code, that's all the laws that have been passed by the first branch are put in that book, it's put on the books. The laws of legislations are signed into law by the governor. The governor has certain role and responsibility. He can veto a proposed legislation that's sent to him from the legislature and said, no, I don't think I want this to be a law. However, as I said, there's a check and balance. His decision could be overridden by the senators. This need a specific number to override the veto of the governor. So the governor has a lot of power here in the US Virgin Islands, but the powers of each branch is limited by the Revised Organic Act of 1954. So be familiar with that. Also, you should be familiar with the US Constitution. It's part of the supreme law of the land. And what we mean by that supreme law of the land, we're talking the land includes the 50 states and the 5 unincorporated territories. Federal laws supersede local laws. The Revised Organic Act is an act from Congress, so that's federal law. It supersedes the Virgin Islands Code. We should be familiar with the Public Law 94-854 that authorizes the US Virgin Islands to draft its own constitution. It's just a draft. The Congress has to approve that draft. Then there's a third branch. The third branch is the judiciary branch, and the judiciary branch interprets the law. So when there is a legal dispute, it is up to a judge to listen to the case, the plaintiffs and the defendants, let them present the evidence, and the judge makes a ruling. And now we see in the case with the Democratic Party, taking the matter about paying for the primary elections, which is not the first time, as I mentioned already. It has been done before when the St. Croix district, when there was the two boards, there was the St. Croix Board of Elections was trying to get the Democratic Party to pay for primary election, and the matter went to court. The plaintiff was Cecil Benjamin, who was chair of the national, state chair or district chair, not sure exactly, but he was a Democratic Party official that took the matter to court and prevailed. So it's not the first time. And then you have the voters, our responsibility. We should be aware of we're not part of the government per se, but we the people, we have a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. So we're the ones that, and if you're a registered voter, we decide who would be the governors, who would be the senators, and indirectly who would be the attorney general and the judges, the local judges, because the governor of the Virgin Islands appoints the AG, the Attorney General for the Virgin Islands, and appoints the judges for the Superior Court and the Supreme Court. But the federal judges are not appointed by the governor for the district courts. They're not appointed. So Judge Robert Malloy is a federal judge. He was not appointed by a local, by the governor of the Virgin Islands. So keep that in mind. So again, first question, should primary elections be paid for by political parties? And the Democratic Party is not the only political parties. Officially, you have 3 parties in the territory, political parties. Besides the Democratic Party, you have the Republican Party and you have the ICM Party. The Green Party is not an established political party, but you do have a gubernatorial team that is advocating for people to join the Green Party. Well, that's your right, I guess, your constitutional right to join whatever party or organization you wish to join. The second question is, what's your understanding of the role and responsibilities of the supervisor of elections and the board of elections? What's your understanding? There's so much conflicts now, confusion, but the laws are on the books. But you are entitled to your opinion. If you have a different idea than what's in the law, you're entitled to express it. You have freedom of speech. You have the First Amendment right. But according to the law, 8690, it's crystal clear to me. It may not be to some of you. So if you have a different understanding, I would like to hear from you. But my understanding, based on the language in Act 8690, the supervisor of elections certified candidates to be on the ballot and also certify the elections. So if you have a different understanding from mine, you're welcome to call in and express your thoughts. I respect everybody's opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. Again, the numbers are 340-773-0390 and 340-773-0490. That's question number 2. Okay, question number 2. As I said, there have been so many lawsuits in the past pertaining to election laws and conflicts within the Board of Elections, where you had members actually file lawsuit against other members, lawsuit against the supervisor of elections. Some of these matters are pending, and I'm awaiting the outcome. Or you've had candidates file lawsuits against the supervisor of elections, and the matters have not been fully resolved. However, an election is coming. I predicted a Category 10 political storm. Why I say that is this. I think you are going to have a lot It's just a prediction. I'm not presenting facts. You are going to have even more conflict arising pertaining to the upcoming elections. You are going to have dissatisfaction with some board members, board of elections, some candidates, some voters, but the laws are in place. Nonetheless, legal disputes always arise, even with laws in place, because sometimes the local laws could be unconstitutional unless someone challenges it. It remains if it remains unchallenged, okay, it's no problem, but it could be challenged. Someone could look at the present laws now on the in the Virgin Islands could and say, no, 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 this one is unconstitutional, or the way it's being implemented or enforced, you have conflicts. For example, there was a time when you were required to be here no less than 90 days before you can register to vote in the territory. That was challenged because it was a violation of federal law. The maximum time to be a registered voter in any state or territory is 30 days. So you cannot impose a requirement more than 30 days before a resident can register to vote. I research, and in fact, in some states, you can register to vote the same day of elections. Okay? So that's why I'm predicting a category 10 and political storm. Also, imagine if there is no primary elections, what will happen? That could be a possibility. That is a possibility. That could be, it is a possibility. It's not impossible. What if the legislature said, we don't have the money for a primary election? We can't find the money. Therefore, we're not going to fund any primary elections. Can you imagine how long the ballot will be? Because they I believe they have, I'm not sure, have appropriated the funds for the general election. I know the supervisor, Dr. Carolyn Fox, submitted a budget for the upcoming general elections. I don't know if that has been finalized by the legislature, but I know no funds has yet to be identified for a primary election. I don't even know if there has been a budget submitted for a primary election from the supervisor of elections. I know what I don't know. I can tell you that. I know what I don't know. So the question is, how you what's your understanding, role, and responsibility of the supervisor of elections and the board of elections? And then the third question is, how do you believe the 6 Constitution, or how could you ensure that the Sixth Constitutional Convention will be a success this time? And what recommendations you have in terms of election laws? I really would like to hear your thoughts. But if no one is going to call in, I will be happy to give my thoughts on the matter. I prefer to hear from others, but nonetheless, my mission and passion is to educate, enlighten, and inspire minds. So I am going to give you some thoughts on that question. The question: how could the success of the Sixth Constitutional Convention be ensured? And what election laws you would like to see included in our constitutional draft? It's obvious at this point we're not going to have an opportunity to go to the polls this general election to ratify a draft, a constitutional draft. That's not happening because the Sixth Constitutional Convention was requested an extension of the deadline to submit the draft, and also to increase the appropriation to draft this constitution. Like I said, I know what I don't know. I cannot tell you exactly what is the approved deadline to submit a constitutional draft, but I can tell you the Sixth Constitutional Convention is in session. They have been holding sessions, but not public meetings, not public town hall meetings where you could go physically and hear the discussions without having to click on to Microsoft Meeting or Zoom or click on to virtually. No, to the best of my knowledge, if you know have other information, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any update to the public in a open format and not virtual, telling us what direction the Sixth Constitutional Convention is going. No feedback from the public, how we feel certain amendments what should be included. No questionnaire, no survey. It's just discussions on the airwaves, such as, do the voters wish to elect an attorney general? That's one I think should be up for consideration in the form of a referendum this general election, but haven't heard any discussion on that. I would like for the opportunity to go to the poll and to the referendum this general election and decide whether I want to have the Attorney General be an elected position. I can give you my thoughts on it. Yes, I would. Before I was ambivalent about it. But I believe in democracy. I believe in representative democracy, a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. And I believe elected officials are accountable to the voters. And we the ones have to hold them accountable. As the way it is now, the Attorney General is an appointed position. The Attorney General of the Virgin Islands is part of the governor's cabinet. The governor appoints the Attorney General. That Attorney General is accountable to the governor, serves at the pleasure or the whim of the governor, not of the people. So I believe, it's my opinion. So remember, facts can be verified. I believe that the Attorney General should be accountable to the people, and the people should have the opportunity, the electorate specifically, should have the opportunity to appoint the Attorney General. Also, appoint judges, because it's a small community. Often the judges have to recruit themselves because they know the defendants or the plaintiffs. Since the population is probably under 100,000 at this point, when is the next census? Okay, we're in 2026. I guess in 2030 is the next census. So we get a better idea what is the population of the U.S. Virgin Islands. But the estimate is around 80,000. And so often the judges have to recruit themselves. If we have an appointed judge, you don't have much say, you as the voters, and you want to make elected officials accountable. So I think that should be one of the amendments for consideration in a referendum. Also, the governor did suggest an amendment. I don't know if that's going to get a referendum, about the people paying a 1% tax for road repair. I don't know where that discussion has gone. I haven't heard of it. I don't know what's the status on that. But there's some other things you may want to consider. I, for one, would like for the requirement to run for public office, the language be tightened, especially when it comes to the delegate to House of Representatives. The language is vague. I know some folks will argue, well, it's vague also in the US Constitution. In the US Constitution, to elect senators and representatives that make up the Congress, the candidate must be an inhabitant. But in the US Constitution, it doesn't give a specific time frame, how long. And there's confusion about what is an inhabitant Whereas for the other elected positions, well, the other one for the president is very specific for how long you have to be a resident. Okay, because even though you may be a natural born U.S. citizen, you might have gone to live and establish residency in a foreign nation. You can't just come back a year before and decide you want to run for president of the United States. You have to meet a certain residency requirement. Well, the same thing here for governors. I believe it's 5 years. For the senators, I believe it's 3 years. But for delegate to House of Representatives, it just say be an inhabitant. In some jurisdiction, it's very specific for how long. But I did some research and I could tell you the only one, I don't recall the specific amount of time, that had how long you have to be a resident, I believe was the Northern Mariana Islands. But for Puerto Rico, which official title is the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, it just say be an inhabitant. It doesn't give, well, I would say for a fact, for the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I'm not so certain about the others, but for the U.S. Virgin Islands, so let's stick to what I know for sure. It does not say how long you have to be an inhabitant. And I think that needs to be clarified because it's going to continue to cause confusion. And another matter that's, I believe, needs to be addressed in the form of an amendment is the clause for, and this is based on the Revised Organic Act. A convicted felon who has not received a pardon is permanently banned from running for the legislature. That's a permanent ban. That's not the case in other places under the U.S. flag, U.S. jurisdiction. To the best of my knowledge, it's only here, which is a permanent ban unless you have received a pardon, and only for that particular elected position. In other places, it applies for other elected or position where you have some restriction if you are a convicted felon. And we're not talking about the U.S. government because we already know the president of the United States have several felony convictions. So that's not in the U.S. Constitution, but it is in some states. So in some states, it's across the board. It's not specific for senators. It could be for any other elected official. It could be for mayor. It could be for Attorney General. Can you imagine if we had if we already had a constitution that would ask for us to elect the Attorney General, would you want the elected Attorney General to be able to run, even if that Attorney General has a felony conviction? Wouldn't that be interesting? you're dealing with the law, but you have a felony conviction. But since senators are lawmakers, I don't know, for whatever reason, it only applies for senators here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. You could be a convicted felon and run for governor. The governors don't make laws. I guess that's the rationale. They don't make laws, so you could be a convicted felon. Would you want that to continue to be on the books, on the law? Or can we change that if we have a sixth constitutional convention present and allow us to give some amendments such as that? Would you want to see that matter be addressed? Should you be able to run for the Board of Education, the Board of Elections, governor, attorney general, judge, even though you're a convicted felon? So, in my opinion, that matter should be addressed. And why are we late? Why wait? Why wait? As Dr. Malik Siku, when he was promoting the Sixth Constitutional Convention, said, if not now, when? When will we have the opportunity, we the voters, to vote on such type of amendments? Because as it is now, even if you put the amendment on the books, remember, we're being governed by a de facto constitution, which is the Revised Organic Act of 1954. It is not a constitution ratified by the people. So we can't amend it. In order for these amendments, should the people decide in a referendum that's what they want, in order for them to become effectuated, we have to have a constitution ratified by the people. But we don't have to wait until then to know what is it the people want. Do you want to be able to elect a senator with a felony conviction? Or you prefer for it to remain in place but apply to all the elected officials and not just single out the senators? In my opinion, it's sort of discriminatory. Everybody that's elected should be held to a high standard. And unfortunately, it is what it is. It seems like the senators are held to a higher standard than the other elected officials. But it's interesting though, the governor can pardon. If you have a felony conviction, if you receive a pardon from the governor, well, then that would make you be able to run, make you eligible, make you whole, restore all your civil rights. And but what about if the governor is a convicted felon? How how would that one work? Would that governor have to have received, I guess, from a previous governor, I suppose, before they're eligible to run? But you can't pardon yourself. So we'll see what happens. I I know it's about okay, time is now is 9:03. I am going to be wrapping up soon, but here are some articles that I want to read part of. We have here from the St. Thomas source. I probably will not be able to read all of it. And so, but I have several articles here, and you can go seek them for yourself. Reading is fundamental. Read to exceed. Knowledge is power. But we have one here. Plaskett and Democrat candidates urge Senate to fund primary elections. Well, nobody calling them that. My opinion is the law specifically says that the Virgin Islands government is supposed to fund all elections. So that includes special elections, recall elections, primary elections, general elections. And what you call an election when you have a tie? Oh wow, I forget it's called. If you have a tie and you have to go back to decide how to if one gubernatorial candidate doesn't get 50% plus one and you have to go back, what is that one called? What election is that called? Well, to the best of my knowledge, as far as I can remember, maybe there was a time, but I'm just telling you what I can recall. The Virgin Islands government has founded all those elections. Okay, we had special election when there was a challenge with Kevin Rodriguez. That was a special election. We had the election with the initiative as about reapportionment. The Virgin Islands government funded that. Election to pick delegates to the Fifth Constitutional Convention, the Virgin Islands government funded that. So, why is it different this time? Why shouldn't the Virgin Islands government fund the primary election? And should there be a primary election? It would be madness if there's no primary election. The list of candidates so far, it's unofficial, but we have about 10 prospective candidates to delegate to Congress. About 10, I'm going to put up 10 for governors, and probably about 100 for the Senate. So, delegate to Congress Stacey Plastic and 4 other Democrats seeking territorial office have written to the Virgin Islands legislature calling on lawmakers to fully fund the upcoming 2026 primary election according to its statement issued Thursday. The letter sent Tuesday to Senate President Milton Patter and the 36th legislature asserts that the Virgin Islands Board of Elections is obligated by law to conduct primary elections, and the legislature is obligated to fund them. This continues. Don't have time to read, but some of the comments here. You have one potential candidate saying Jeffrey Mohead. Mohead's concern, he said, was whether it was appropriate to use tax money for primary elections that only party members could vote in, with only Democrats allowed to vote in the Democratic primary. The idea of opening primaries to all registered voters, regardless of party affiliation, has been around for more than two decades. Well, the last time there wasn't a primary election and the St. Thomas district because you didn't have sufficient number of candidates for each party. But there was a primary election in 2024. It was funded by the Virgin Islands legislature. But if my memory serves me correctly, we didn't go to the polls and elect party officials. They did their own election. They for members of the Democratic parties. They had their own. But I am certain that this matter is going to be resolved, and based on the history, based on the law, this is just my opinion, it is going to be ruled that the Virgin Islands legislature must fund the primary to elect public officials, not to elect party officials, not to elect who's going to be chair, the national state chair and all of that, and secretary for the party, because Judge Malloy already said political parties' internal affairs should be handled by the party, not by the election system. So we have past records. And once again, I'd like to thank you for listening. Live, listen, learn, love, and levitate. Until next time, hopefully we'll be here again.